Okay, so now we're opening up our coordinate plane to actually show 4 quadrants. And just to make a connection with what we've seen before, all we've really been doing is working in this first quadrant here. Okay, so I'll draw it down here too to give you a sense. So we just, we've had our x-axis, we've had our y-axis. Oops. We have our origin down here, and then however many numbers depending on the graph. Okay, origin down here. So that's what this top right one is, and we call it Quadrant One. Okay, but now we're going to be opening up the coordinate plane to 4 quadrants, and the order or sequence of them is very important. So the top right is Quadrant 1, to its left is Quadrant 2, bottom left Quadrant 3, bottom right Quadrant 4. Also, you'll notice I have Roman numerals representing them because sometimes you're just going to see that. I'm not really sure why they have them sometimes labeled as Roman numerals, but it is a common thing and you want to be aware of that. And that C in the middle, that's just a memory device that could be helpful in remembering the sequence of the quadrants. Okay, so if it's a capital letter of like an English C, if you start here, that's Quadrant 1, and you continue the C, you come to Quadrant 2, you continue drawing the C, you're in Quadrant 3, and now finally you end your letter C in Quadrant 4. So that's also the sequence of the 4 quadrants, or you could think about it as like counterclockwise, whatever is most helpful for you. Now here's some facts about the quadrants based on the points, the ordered pairs, the coordinates that will be in each. Okay, I will actually come back to the slide in a second, but first I want to talk about really what we want to do when we have 4 quadrants sometimes is plot within those 4. Now if you look at letter A, we've done this kind of thing before. We go over 2, up 3, and like we said, that's been the first quadrant we've been working in, still an X first, Y second. But now look at letter B, starting to open it up a little bit. Our X value is 4 and our Y is -1. So we start at the origin, go over 4 to the right on the X-axis, but now we're going to go down. We haven't quite talked about negative numbers yet, but we can just match it up. You see the -1 is below the 0 there. So nothing really changes as far as the how to do it. We're just going to make sure we pay attention to when there's a negative number, whether it's the X or the Y. Okay. Let me just do one more on this. Skip down to E because it's a little tricky. Again, if we start at the origin, the 0 shows us how far down. How far over we want to go. In this case, it's going to be to the right or left, depending if it's a positive or negative number. But it's 0, so we don't move at all. We stay on the X-axis, and we go down 3. So this point here will be 0, -3. So we just want to be comfortable with plotting points in all 4 quadrants. Now, if you want to pause the video, try the other 2, C and D, on your own, and then we can check them together in a minute. Okay, so letter C, -3, 2. So start on the X-axis, start in the origin, and we go over to -3, which is going to be to the left of 0. We go up to 2 because that's a positive Y. And if you don't know what I mean by positive, negative, that's okay. Just match the picture. That's a 2 for the Y. It has no minus sign that we're using. We're used to calling it a minus sign, but now we're going to call it a negative sign. It's got no negative sign in front of it. So we're matching that up. That's point C. That's -3, 2. Okay. And D, if you did that one, your X value is -5, which is actually off this grid. It's not quite drawn to 5, but we can kind of use this line. Oopsie daisy. Use this line here, okay, to represent 5, because if this is -4, and that's this line, then certainly the one to the left of it will be -5, and we go down to -2, and that point D would be right about there. I'm drawing a little sloppy. -5, -2. Okay, over to -5, down to -2. Let me draw with a different color where the dot should actually be. Okay, it's right on that point. Okay, let me go back to this slide. These are just some facts about the quadrants, depending on the points, okay? Starting in Quadrant 1, the top right quadrant, I have a random point I picked there, 4, 2. The one thing you want to know, and this is written here, is that the x will be a positive number and the y will be a positive number anywhere within Quadrant 1. And that's what these little plus signs mean. They're not really plus signs, we're just going to call them positive. And for now, we just need to know that a positive number will not have any symbol in front of it. Like you'll see the negative numbers there, they have the what we know as the minus sign, now we'll call it negative sign. Okay, speaking of that, we go over to Quadrant 2, and I have a random point here, -2, 4. Okay, what this is going to show us that any point in this quadrant will have a negative x value and a positive y value. That's shown there on the grid. It's also written here. Okay? And if you think about it, we're going the x-axis, we're going behind 0. We're anywhere within this quadrant, there'll be a negative x. Because look, no matter how far we go, and since we're going up on the y-axis, it's certainly going to be a positive y. Okay? Let's go down to Quadrant 3. You can pause this video at any time if you need to slow down a little bit, but down the Quadrant 3, bottom left, you can see we have all negative x values, all negative y values. So any point within this range. Here I just have a random example. -4, 1. It's over, I'm sorry, -4, -1. It's over to the left on the x-axis, -4. It's down, -1. So it's a negative and a negative. Okay? But that will work for anywhere on that point, and you could just look at the numbers that are there on the x and y axis within that quadrant as a hint. And our last quadrant, Quadrant 4, is going to have a positive x value and a negative y. And for the same reasons of the other ones, like here are your x values that'll fit this quadrant, and they're all going positive direction to the right of 0. And then here, it's getting a little sloppy here, but going below 0 is our negative y's. So this looks like this. It's a positive x, a negative y, and that's shown here as well. So these are just some facts. Okay, here we're plotting the points, right? We talked about that. But back here, you might be asking questions like, which quadrant has both a negative value for x and y? And you would say Quadrant 3, okay? So you want to also just be familiar with that. And if you don't remember that it's Quadrant 3, you could always just look at the numbers, and just that could give you a hint. It's negative symbols in front of the x's and y's. You could even start plotting points to kind of just double check yourself to answer the question correctly.